Welcome, governors, back to another episode. Today is a very special episode because we have a special guest. It's someone who I've known for quite a while now. And in my eyes, he's one of the governance and Power Platform administration gurus of our community. He's
Was it?
amazing. He's got a blog that's helped me so much. And so I'm going to introduce Craig White. And Craig, would you like to just tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hi. I mean, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you. I won't put myself up there with some of the other powerhouses in the governance area, but yeah, I try to do my bit. Yeah, Craig White, Power Platform nerd for the last 9, 10 years. Done some SQL stuff before that. Biz Apps MVP, which is quite nice for the last couple of years. Work at A&S Group, which is a Microsoft partner in the UK. And I like Lego. That's about it, really, to be fair. As you could probably tell.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And I think we could probably start by, probably one of the leading voices in governance in the community. Charles has said, you're a guru. Um, we've done quite a few videos on governance now, but one thing, and we were talking about this before we came onto the video, was around a comment you'd left on one of our videos around some of the settings that are around for Copilot. So it'd be good to dive a little bit more into the governance around kind of Copilot, the settings that exist and what we should be looking out for. You want to kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. I think this is kind of how our roles are now massively expanding, isn't it? Like, we're not just Power Platform admins in the old traditional sense of the last 9 years when we're just looking at apps and flows in the COE toolkit, because there's these agent things, and you might have heard of them. There's agents sprouting up in all sorts of different places in generative AI, and it's all wicked, and I love it. But there's more controls to enable, to configure, just in the Power Platform Admin Center alone, never mind in other parts of the stack now as well. So it's just trying to get familiar with some of those. I'm still learning a few of them, but yeah, we've been talking to customers about some of these, so I'll show you where they are. So from a Power Platform perspective, I reckon most admins are probably doing stuff in like the actions bit, and in manage and looking at tenant settings. I think that's been quite a common thing that we've talked about. I think you've done a video on tenant settings as well. And there's lots of key ones that we enable about environment provisioning, how we use AI builder credits and stuff. That's all been quite commonplace, I think. But there's this tiny thing called Copilot, which is now an additional option, and it's got its own settings. Now, I haven't been through all of these, and some of them are literally, if you click on one, it doesn't actually do anything. It just sort of takes you to an article and then tells you how to configure it. It's not like a switch for a yes or no or anything like that. But there are a couple of really important ones. One of the biggest ones, to my mind anyway, is generative AI settings. So if we go into here, we have to kind of apply this to environment groups, which is manage environment feature, or individual environments, of which I have none. So I'm going to go and pick a group. And as you can tell, I've just randomly typed a group name and misspelt it because it's my tenant. So don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. But there are two really important bits here that I want to try and focus on. By using the generative AI services, which is the first option, I agree to my data being processed outside of my environment's geographical region or compliance boundary. So in my mind, that's hugely, hugely important. The old school default environments way back in the day would have a region of Europe. If you create a new tenant now, the default, I believe, is in your region of residence, right? So for us, it's now United Kingdom for new tenants, which is absolutely fine. So data in the default environment, especially, would not be processed outside of that region because the region is the United Kingdom. But we've been working with some organizations who have got old school, default environments from back in the day where their region is still Europe. Does this potentially have some sort of impact? Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. There's some options to learn more. And there is some kind of like looking for like EU boundaries, and personal data remains in the EU boundaries committed in the product terms. But that might still not be enough for that particular industry or organization's regulatory requirements. Data has to stay in X, Y, and Z. And I certainly don't want generative AI to be processing my data out of these boundaries. So this is an important one that we're starting to look at the customer to say, well, actually, just to be on the safe side, if you've got any non-UK environments, if you're a UK company, switch that off because we don't want people to be going and having their data generated outside of their boundaries. If they're a multinational, multi-tenant organization with multi-environments in different regions, then yeah, cool. Just making sure that this is still like front of focus, and maybe group your environments into, Argentina environments, Europe environments, whatever it is, and make sure that this setting is on for the right group or off for the right groups, depending on what you want to do. So that's a big one. Something else we've been looking at as well has been around, do we want people to use preview and experimental AI models? Very simple, yes or no, really. I think GTP5 was it that came out in studio not so long back? And I think it went GA pretty quickly, didn't it? But if we don't want people to use preview models or experimental, we've been in the Power Platform long enough to know, haven't we, that if something is in preview, it's not recommended for production use. It might go away at any time. The irony is that all of these things are in our production tenant, where we typically want to play with these things and assess them. So maybe we might say to people that have an environment group for admin environment. So if we worked in an organization and we were the administrators, I'd say us three have access to a dedicated environment where we can test out new features and evaluate them. So maybe I want this setting on so we can go and like, what do these new models look like? Are they good? Are they bad? How do we compare it to what we've currently got, which is maybe like GTP4, 4.0, whatever? And we can make those assessments. So when they go live or GA, we can then engage with our internal communities to say, now everyone else has got access to these models, but we just switch them off for the main environments where people are developing stuff and maybe just have it as an assessment bit for admins, for example. Something else we kind of recommend to say, well, actually, if you don't want people using experimental things, turn this off. And we do know the kind of the angle at the moment, isn't it? Is like these things are enabled by default, so people can go and make stuff and do cool things. But actually, from a healthy life cycle management perspective, maybe we want to kind of keep a better eye on these things.
So these two settings that you've gone through so far.
Yes.
So can we just explain a little bit about what they impact on? So it's not just Copilot Studio. If people are thinking, oh, it's Copilot, it's only Copilot Studio. It's not really that. It covers so many things, doesn't it?
I mean, the AI builder stuff, I think it'll impact as well, right? And that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's also part of the third one as well, of like, do we want people to construct their own prompts? Like, what kind of prompts are they constructing? Are they good prompts, healthy prompts, bad prompts? Are they going to be trying to do some sort of prompt injection attacks in our own agents by crafting their own prompts to use? Do we want people to do that kind of stuff? Probably not. But yeah, a lot of these, certainly things in like the experimental AI models, there are experimental things in AI Builder that we can plug into apps and flows. So again, do we want people to do those kind of things? I think they're great to assess what's coming, and we can kind of help, shape the future of the product. So we can engage with Microsoft and go, hey, I like this preview model. Here's some feedback. Can you make it better? But yeah, we might not want our standard users, our makers, to be experimenting with all these features, or maybe like a group of champions that are maybe kind of like a higher grade of maker and internally. They can have an access to an environment to assess the preview models, but can we go and, switch that off in other places, right? Because as you say, the impact isn't just agents. Lots of companies are now starting to use AI Builder because they think it's new because it's got the letters AI in it. It's like, well, no, it's been around for a while, but yeah, there's some extra controls that we need to potentially put in place, right?
So with these settings, we've got also in Dataverse, we've got a new AI prompt column, haven't we?
Yes.
Do you know if these settings impact on that prompt column in Dataverse?
I'm not sure, but something I did learn about prompt columns, and I still need to do some investigative work on this, is I wonder how they're being triggered and run, because a customer I'm working with this week has used 700,000 AI credits in a developer environment by using a prompt column. 700,000. And I'm wondering if that prompt column is running every time there's a keystroke or something in another column. I don't fully know how they work. And we were talking about, well, actually, we know in the AI hub, in make.powerapps.com, make.powerautomate.com, you could build your own prompts and plug them into a flow. So maybe you've got a bit more control. So when you've got all your data, then go and run this one flow that does this one prompt, and you've probably can consume less credits. So I'm not sure if these features, prompt columns, which are preview in their own right, if I'm not mistaken, be worth a test, actually, just to kind of see if they do break anything, because more people are going to start to use those columns. But yeah, maybe there's a bit of investigative work on how they're going to impact. What are they called now? Copilot credits, not AI Builder credits, I think.
That's
is that
right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So not sure what the impact is on that yet.
So one of the things that you were telling us before is about the speed of change, the rate of change with all of this, and that it's very difficult to keep track of what's happening in the admin center just because so much is changing.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I can't remember exactly what it was. I came in yesterday. I was doing a demo. Where was it? I think it was down here. I came into security, and I mean, this might have been around for ages, and I just haven't paid attention. But it seems new that there's a threat detection part in security, and we've now got some additional, again, albeit preview. Okay, well, we've got enhanced agent protection. What does that do? Okay, it looks like we can go and, set it up per environment. That's fine. And we've now got some stuff to do with Microsoft Defender, okay, which is new detection capabilities, which is a completely different part of the Microsoft administrative suite. For those that don't know, you're now going beyond the realms of Power Platform admin, you get into other parts. But I find it really difficult to keep up. It's not like we have a dedicated RSS feed from Microsoft that gives us, here's the latest changes to administrative stuff, because, I mean, respectfully, that's not the fun stuff. That doesn't sell licenses. We want to see all the cool stuff like AI building apps and flows. That's fun, right? And we can assess those changes, and they're quite regular. But I find like quite a lot of the stuff I find that's new is just from clicking around and doing demos and just being familiar with the interface to know something's changed. And that's really hard because it's always quite reactive to keep up to date with what is now a very big suite of admin stuff, right?
I'm getting the feeling as well, I don't know if you both feel the same, but there definitely seems to be more of an emphasis on security around AI, that there seems to be the initial kind of excitement's kind of worn off. And we're at this period now where it's like, okay, yeah, you can have an AI, but now it's kind of going up the kind of chain of command a little bit, and the kind of big questions are being asked. Like, what about security? What about governance? And I think as a result, we're seeing some of these kind of features trickle into the platform, like we just seen there, and Defender for Copilot and enhanced protection for Copilot. So it's really interesting to see kind of this space mature. I think we've been on a journey for so long with Power Platform that kind of maturity feels like it's already there now, and no one really gets excited about that now. It's all about agents, it's all about AI, and that excitement's now on that side of things and the maturity on that platform.
Yeah, completely agree. I think the excitement will continue to build as we come to sort of the end of the year. We've got the Power Platform conference next week. I'd imagine there'll be some new announcements, especially around generative AI, generative pages, plans, all the new stuff. And I think we then got Ignite a little bit further down the road, if we're in November. Again, I'd imagine it'll be more user-based functionality. And when we get to the book of news, the admin stuff will be like buried down on like page 154 and it won't be fully announced. There has to be more administrative capabilities to support this absolute breadth of data and capabilities. I expect to see some more aggressive stuff coming to admins. It'd be nice if it was all in one place. That'd be my biggest thing. It's like, can we have like one portal? Maybe we need like an agent admin center. I know we've got the Copilot control system, but that I think effectively is made up of, is it 3 portals? Microsoft 365 admin, Purview, I think, and Power Platform admin center. It'd be great if we could administer agents all in one place, maybe, because going between 3 or 4 portals is quite difficult, isn't it?
Very difficult.
Challenging.
And so it feels like the kind of run through from Microsoft is that they have these features that they announce and they implement without governance or with very minimal governance. And then we finally get governance later on.
Yes.
So think one of the things that Microsoft could do is if they gave us more governance controls, it would help us to then be able to enable more people because we'd feel less concerned about the risk involved.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I completely agree. And I think there's another side of it of it's a lot harder to take things away when they've had access compared to giving people access when they haven't got it, if that makes sense. So one, it's mitigating risk. And I think Copilot, M365 Copilot more widely, and agents, is now exposing a lot of risk. Okay, well, we didn't actually structure our documents properly in SharePoint, and we've been oversharing stuff from OneDrive for the last 15 years. Oh no, we need to fix those kind of things. But we've been trying to do that reactive governance for ages, haven't we, in terms of, oh, look, you've had 10 years worth of apps and flows in the default environment that call in the Google API. Well, we don't want to do that. Well, we've got to stop that, and then we upset people. So the ability to assess that risk, and also to have these things in place, not as an afterthought, but as in parallel. We're going to release this. We need to govern it. Let's make sure both things are sort of done in tandem to give a little bit more autonomy and confidence to admins that things are being released in terms of our company cadence, because every company is different, right? They've got different visions, different roadmaps, different ways they want to use and adopt AI. without necessarily being forced on them, without that control. I think the Power Platform's been like that. That was a turning point. I think 2016, we went from lots of control and regimentation to here, go and do whatever you want. And the admins, I think back in 2017, it was like the admin center was so small for Power Platform, you could only create like 3 environments per account, maybe 2. DLP was just about out, but I didn't really understand it back then, to be honest, to know what the impact was. We had no COE toolkit, no APIs, no PowerShell, nothing. We didn't get any visibility of all this stuff. It's changing, but I still think the admin side of thing is like playing catch up compared to all the fun stuff, right? Like, give me an admin Copilot where I can go into the PPAC and just go, how many apps have got the default environment? Like, give me an agent that helps with that. Like, we've got the Copilots in Azure that will just go, tell me all of my terabyte usage, and it was going to tell you. Give me something like that. It's going to help me do my day-to-day admin. I'll be pretty happy.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Can we have an admin MCP server? And then we can
You can
talk
do
to it.
that. If you've seen some of Daniel Laskovitz's stuff in the community recently, using like the APIs that are available, you can effectively build an MCP agent, and you can like go list my tenant settings, list my DLP policies, and you can actually talk to the agent to make changes, turn on tenant isolation, and it'll go and do it for you. Like, that kind of stuff is really cool.
So
Can we
powerful.
expand that to say, right, can we add in more controls? Can you tell me what config this policy is? What connectors have been blocked? What's got actions and triggers blocked and allowed? I'd love to see that expand, and we just basically use agents to manage our agents and our apps and flows. That'd be wicked, because I think just one place manage everything will be wicked, right? That'd be good.
And one of the things I want to pick up on is one of Charles' comments just there around how Microsoft has a tendency to kind of put things in place first and then do the governance later. And one of the things I feel is a good example of that is managed environments and the managed kind of capabilities within the platform.
Okay.
It's slowly but surely kind of been building up, and it's becoming more feature rich. You can, again, start to feel that kind of maturity there with it. Craig, how has managed kind of environments, managed governance in Power Platform kind of changed things for you?
In the beginning, not so much. Think from the customers I deal with, I'm sure it's different across the world, but from we look at a lot of NHS and higher education, respectfully companies that haven't got loads of money to throw at stuff. And we know that if we make an environment managed, everything in that environment becomes premium, even if it's just an app looking at a SharePoint list, completely against that sort of logic for the last 9 years. I get the process, but I think some of the features perhaps haven't been like widely kind of where people want to clamber on top of each other. Yeah, I need that, I need that, I need that. It's just been stuff that might be quite niche. That's very powerful, like IP firewall, cookie binding stuff. Not every organization that I've met is going to want to use those features. But there'll be someone out there somewhere go, yeah, I need that in my life. Wicked. That's really good. Power Platform pipelines, I think, has been the standout for the last sort of year or so. People that haven't got access to DevOps, they don't know how to do pipeline stuff. They don't want that debt to kind of manage or resource internally, but they also don't want to do manual import export. So Power Platform pipelines, that's a nice tick. I've got a nice interface. I can move stuff from dev to test to prod and stick an approval flow in or something. Wicked. That's a really good use case. What I'm seeing now is people are starting to get a little bit more on board with managed environments because of advanced connector policies. So you chaps finally covered DLP previously, which is always been our standard way of managing connectors in the Power Platform, right? What APIs can we and can we not call? And from a standard policy, there are a bunch of connectors we can't block. So you can't block SharePoint, you can't block Dataverse, you can't block a bunch of the other M3 services. You can't also block the dumb ones like Skype for Business. No one uses Skype for Business, so why can't we block it? Come on, guys, sort it out. But nonetheless, you can't block it. Advanced connector policies allows us to block unblockable connectors. And it also allows us to block MCP servers. So if you don't want people spinning up agents to connect to MCP servers, ones out of the box, you can only do so in advanced connector policies. Starting to see a lot more interest in managed environments now, and just almost kind of having to swallow the fact that, yes, okay, we might need to pay for this additional layer of governance. Do I agree with that? I'll leave that for another day. But it's an additional option now of how we've got extra layers of protection to best kind of support our platform, right? Because I think CMCP is going to be the next big thing. Do we want every single person or organisation running off building agents against MCP servers? Well, maybe not. We want to kind of rein some of that back in a little bit. And advanced connected policies is one of those big things now against managed environments. So I'm excited to see how that evolves in the next sort of couple of years, because I reckon that'll be quite powerful.
So, with the organizations that you mentioned, the ones that don't have as much money to throw at these licenses, can you see something that would be a tipping point where it would mean that they would invest in licenses? Or do you think for the majority of those organizations, they're never going to be in that place? So, therefore, these additional features are ones that they shouldn't even really look at?
I personally think if you want to get the licensing, use your business cases for automation to push the agenda. You're never going to go, well, I personally wouldn't think, and I've never heard it myself, if I went to a place a few years ago, go, hi, Mr. CTO, yeah, can I have some extra licenses because I want to use some admin features? You're going to probably get laughed out the room. If you rock up and go, we've got this business critical app that uses Dataverse and premium connectors, we've identified we could save this much money, you're more likely to get that pot of licensing, and then you could ring fence that solution to a managed environment and take advantage of the features you're then already paying for, because they're premium environment features, but they're wrapped up in the user licensing, aren't they? So I think if people still try and find legitimate business cases to improve processes using premium connectivity, I think by extension we'll be able to unlock a lot more of the advanced features from the admin side of things. So kind of like a win-win. I think more people are slowly starting to think, well, actually, yeah, now we've done all these sort of cloud migrations and we've sorted out all of our infrastructure and networks, and maybe there's some free capital being freed up like over the next sort of couple of years, they can now start investing in some more of the premium licensing across the Power Platform, whereas they've perhaps not been able to unlock those funds in previous years, as they might have other kind of IT projects, it's not been part of their initial roadmap. But I think people now have more interest because they've ticked off more things. They've already spent the money on other things, so they're ready to kind of go. I can see that being a big thing, and therefore they can play around with some of these things that are premium environment features, I guess, right?
And at the same time, when you have your licenses, you then have more security capabilities. So you're reducing the risk to the organization. And once you have those licenses, you don't have a limit on the number of apps that you can use with the license. So
Exactly.
then you can start getting more and more return on your investment.
Win-win-win-win scenario, right?
And then sometimes it's a really small tipping point. I was working with a customer in the last couple of weeks. We're giving them some demos on Dataverse. And there's a question from the audience of well, why would I use Dataverse over SharePoint? I'm sure we've heard all that question a few times. And then we showed them column security profiles. Win, done. Because you can't do that in SharePoint without some very hacky code that you're not meant to do it online. I did a lot of that kind of stuff in SharePoint on-prem because you could just do your own code and inject it in. It was fine. You can't do that so freely in SharePoint Online, but you've got so much more security options in Dataverse, and that could be a big thing as Dataverse security, or security in front and center for data now with Copilot. So anything that can improve the security posture, maybe people more likely to kind of add some extra funds in there because it's going to secure what is the king and queen of the platform, as Chris Huntingford said, is your data, innit? Get that secure, and you've probably got a better chance of doing that using a premium data source, Azure SQL, Dataverse, whatever that might be, as opposed to kind of shoehorning a couple of SharePoint lists together with respect. Although we've all been there and done it, right? So I'm not knocking it. But yeah,
everyone has to start somewhere.
Well, yeah, I've started there. I mean, if you come from a Dynamics background, you come from a Dataverse background. If you come from a SharePoint background, then you're probably a few years beyond the Dataverse stuff and playing catch up. I was SharePoint back end, so I've built plenty of relational SharePoint databases for apps, and yeah, if I could go back to my past self, I'd have a word. But we all start somewhere. Yeah, just to touch very quickly, advanced connector policies, again in preview. We talked about that one earlier on, but you can just see from the text here, choose which certifies connectors, actions, triggers, and MCP service to allow, which we can't do in standard policies. We can only do like the bog standard, if you like, APIs, of which there's 1,500, I don't know, something or other. It's slightly different mechanics in how it works, advanced connector policies, because you have to apply them to environment groups, which again is all part of that managed environment feature. And I quite like that because you're just applying one policy to a group of environments. So you're sort of just managing at the parent level, which I think is quite nice. And what I also like about advanced connector policies, if you're a proper nerd about Power Platform DLP like me, you've got 3 buckets in the standard policy, right? You've got business, non-business, and blocks. I've personally never worked with an organisation that puts anything in non-business. Have you chaps? Have you ever come across any circumstances for that?
Not really, personally.
There
Usually
you
it's
go.
been
You
blocked.
either block it or you allow it. To my
Yeah.
mind, it's either going to be ready to use for the business or you don't want it used for the business. What I like about advanced connector policies is there is no non-business. It is literally just allowed or blocked. There's no grey area, which is quite nice. And then obviously within here, you've then got things like the MCP server stuff, which you don't necessarily have the standard DLP stuff. And if you want to kind of go a level further, I think there is some stuff in terms of is it this one? I know it's a slightly different one, isn't it? Because they've now got a new Dataverse connector that no one really knows what it is. So for the Dataverse MCP stuff, you can see this is another thing you can't do in standard DLP is allow and block actions and triggers for unblockable connectors, one being Dataverse, but in advanced connectors policies that we can see that we can go and have that granularity of maybe we don't want people to use a Dataverse MCP server or to delete rows from our data or to download images, but we do want them to get attribute filters or something like that, right? So advanced connector policies, really strong, and I'm starting to see a lot more uptake in that now, and I think you can see why, because it does give a lot more governance around agents, and that's front and center of a lot of companies' minds now. They want agents, they want the AI. They will be willing to pay for the additional governance to make sure their agents aren't going to be doing dodgy stuff. Happy days, right?
If you're using Copilot Studio, it's a no-brainer that you want to license your users, really.
Well, yeah, exactly that. Especially if your agent is going to go off to, internal SAP systems, CRMs that you've had for many years. They're all premium connectors in the kind of, the old school way of looking at stuff, right? So by extension, you're going to need licenses to use that agent. So you may as well use the premium features that you're already paying for from an environment level. Happy days. And that kind of impacts environment strategy a little bit as well, right? So if you just got a couple of edge cases, say like 50 licenses, stick those in and it's all premium, stick that in a dedicated environment, then you can use the managed environments capabilities because you're already paying for them. So why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah. One of the features I really like of advanced connector policies for Dataverse is the one where you can get data or delete data from selected environments. Because, of course, that's where you're creating this bridge between multiple environments. Sometimes you don't want to create that bridge between the environments because you can do some damage there.
Yes. I'm quite surprised that action came out a while back, that getting data from a selected environment. I do sort of get it because I think if people want to try and run that master data concept, you want your master data in one place. You don't want to duplicate it across lots of different places, right? So I do kind of get it. But then I also think, like you say, it's opening it up to, I'm always a fan of I would go Azure SQL every day of the week and let like a proper data warehouse team manage a multi-dimensional database. If you're going to pay for the licenses, stick your data in Azure SQL or something like that. Don't use Dataverse. If I'm going to get
that as your master data.
Yeah, I would. And then that is a single source of truth because it doesn't matter what environment you're then working in, you're still authenticating to that single source of truth somewhere else to get your master data. That's what I do.
Can I just ask a question on the advanced connector policies then? I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but I'm very curious if you do. So we can block Dataverse, and that in on itself is really powerful, right? Because you can do it by default. I know there'll be lots of organizations out there that will be maybe compelled to go down that route because they don't want to unlock Dataverse, the organization yet. But we know that the default environment uses Dataverse. Can we block Dataverse from the default environment using advanced connector policies?
I believe so.
Because that's quite a big thing, if true.
Yeah, because approvals in the default environment are stored in Dataverse from what I remember, right? I think that's right. But the use of that table in that instance is free because it's the default environment. Yeah, that's a good shout, that. Ooh.
I'm curious. It just got me thinking there, and I'm maybe it's something we do a follow up on because I'd love to know kind of what the impact of that would be.
Hang on a minute. I'm going to do a new group and go call default group. Let's do it live. See if we can do it. Actually, no. What's in my default environment? I might break some stuff.
Do you think it's also very interesting from the perspective of you might have enabled Dataverse on your default environment and not actually having wanted to do that. But there's no reversal for that, is there? Once it's enabled, that's it.
What? There's no reversal for what? Sorry.
For enabling Dataverse
Yeah,
on
correct.
your default
Yeah,
environment.
yeah. Josh, it is possible, but you have to make default managed,
Yes.
which again, by extension, then makes everything in their premium, and that's probably the last place most companies are going to want to do that in for the interim until they've cleaned it out, right? But yeah, in theory, you could say yes. I don't know what the impact would be. It's very, very interesting. That's a good thought. I
Yeah.
like that. That's a good curveball. Let's go away and do some testing on that. Be good.
Well, even if you didn't want to lock down the default environment, you would want to lock down some of those actions, wouldn't you?
Yes, yes. And I think like default typically is the most restrictive policies, right? We want the least amount of cowboy activity going on in default and just give you the smallest number of connectors and connectivity to do your job. And then if you want to be able to go and do something at a higher grade, then you need to go somewhere else that allows a bit more in terms of connectivity because it's been through some kind of request and approval and security have been over it to kind of assess the impact, right? So, yeah, I've seen a lot of times where also you could maybe argue about do you block Dataverse in developer environments? Because the solution I talked about earlier on, there was a chap in an organization I worked with this week. He's got a developer environment. He's built an awesome solution. He's taught himself model-driven apps and he's using prompt columns and he's using this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden he goes and puts it in UAT and it's screaming, I need licensing. Now, actually, do we enable Dataverse for developer environments? Once they've kind of read some T and Cs and go, okay, well, yes, we'll enable it. But if you're going to build something that's going to go into production, you need to talk to X, Y, and Z because you might have some licensing capabilities or needs and demands before we then promote that. Just to help educate people, you can have access to that connector once you've understood like what your ramifications is and what you're doing, rather than start flying in and just building stuff without kind of that full knowledge, right?
It's so important, isn't it, for someone building something to know, are they building something that's under standard licensing or premium licensing?
Yes. And you know the
It's
thing
awful
I
if it's
all
going to
the
be shared
time,
with
right?
1,000 people and they don't have licenses.
Yeah, and the thing I share with people all the time, and I'm going to share my screen for this, is in one of my, if I could just say like one tip for admins, I mean, I've got many, but let's just say there's just one, and I go into this link several times a day. It's the list of connectors because of Microsoft Learn, I've got some really good stuff about the Power Platform, and every single connector has got its own page in Microsoft Learn. And what I love about these pages are, let's say I'm going to go to the Chuck Norris connector because that is one of the most important connectors anyone can ever allow in an organization.
Yeah, we do all of our admin with that one.
Well, yeah, full on, right? I just use it as my persona for all my agents. It's wicked. But it tells me everything I need to know. Straight away at the top, what are my licensing considerations depending on where I'm consuming this API? What support is available? If it's a third-party API, Daniel decides he doesn't want to support it anymore, and I'm relying on that, I could be in trouble. If it's Microsoft supporting it or Adobe, maybe I've got additional support overheads. What if I've got to pay for a support contract of some kind? That's another cost over on top of my licensing costs. What if it's something like Plum Sale, where it's free, but you've got to pay for the API key? Okay, well, that's an additional cost and so on and so forth. So a lot of the information for connectors is in here, as well as the throttling limits, what actions and triggers has it got, what payloads am I going to be expecting, known limitations. I always show this one as well. If you look at the Office 365 app, probably the most popular connector for sending emails, right? But the list of known limitations is massive. So I'd still want to assess this to make sure that my project is going to be right based on what I'm trying to achieve. Well, are these known limitations going to stop me from delivering that requirement? The connector pages has all that information. So yeah, if anyone's never sure about where to go to find out if they're going to be building something premium, go and find the relevant page on for the connector and start there. And your licensing stuff has always been at the top of the page, and I hope it stays there because it's nice and quick and easy, right? Wouldn't it be great if we had like an MCP server to go, I'll give me the license information about this connector, and it'll just go, right, license requirements, no limitations, bang, 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 bang. Maybe that's something we could do in the future, right?
That does sound really good. You brought something to my mind as well, which is one of the things is where the actions could be deprecated.
Good
So
shout.
that's something that's important to look at. So there's one connector, which is the Office 365 groups one, I think it was. And there was a video from Reza Durrani where he showed you how you could kind of abuse it by making requests to SharePoint. so that you could get around not needing to use the HTTP request connector. And of course, at some point that became deprecated. They had a new version where it was scoped so you could only contact the groups part of Graph API. But yeah, it's these kinds of things. You'll find the mouse on this page, but you wouldn't find them out otherwise.
Yeah, and something I requested years ago, and I'd love this to be a thing in the Siri toolkit. If you go down and dirty into the connectors table and look at the underlying API, there is a nested object for each connector that says actions, and it's just blank. It's just 2 square brackets, and that's it. I would love for that API to be able to return all of these actions here. So you could pump them into a SharePoint list or a Dataverse table, and you can run it every day to say, has anything changed between this action ID and what's coming out of the API today? So we can flag things like, has an action been deprecated, or have we now got a V2? And there'll be a period of time when you can use the V1 and the V2. So you know, okay, well, the V1 is going to be deprecated at some point because we're now using V2. I'd love to be able to have a more easier way of identifying what's been deprecated. I think that'd be really, really strong. Really, really strong.
You bring something to my mind, which is with the Power Platform for Admins connectors. So we've got a version 1 and a version 2 connector.
Yeah.
And they have very different actions. So it feels like the version 2 is not ever going to replace the version 1, but it has the newer things to it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Again, talking about this earlier on, if we're looking at the V1, this is kind of more around, I'm thinking around the more of the free stuff. So list policies, environment roles, list environment as admin, delete an environment, create an environment, do all the free stuff. If you want to look at the Power Platform for Admins V2, hang on a minute, let me try and find it. I think this is when we're starting to get into a little bit more of the how do we automate some of the managed features. So we're looking at environment groups and billing policies, creating environment groups. You can sort of see where the APIs are heading. So yeah, you're right. It's like sometimes the V2 isn't replacing the V1. It's just a completely different set of actions. And again, I'd like to know when that happens, rather than like, it's great that we work in a community where there's loads of calls and blogs and we get to find out about these things. But there is a lot of stuff that slips through the net. And if we could be better identified about those things, even at a really granular level like this, it's going to help our makers, our developers to understand, hey, there's a new API to use. Can you assess it? Can you test it out? Is it better? Is it worse? Rather than just sort of like, we only find out because it stops working because it's been deprecated. That's not how I want to find out about stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's really important, isn't it? And it's really important as governors that we keep an eye on these things. You know, there's been some really fantastic tidbits, I think, that, you know, anyone watching will take away from this. Craig, it's been fantastic having you on. You know, we've learned some really cool things today. Hopefully our viewers have learned some really cool things too. Likewise, if you, our viewers, have enjoyed the video, do like, subscribe, leave a comment, feedback. Always happy to get some feedback on our videos. Craig, thanks again for coming on today.
Thanks for having us. It's been fun. Cheers.
Thanks, Craig.